In speedrunning, we often focus on the efforts of the individual because at its core, speedrunning is a competition. However, speedrunning is more often than not a community effort. These tricks, techniques, and strategies are often found and shared by multiple community members in order to piece together the fastest possible run. But sometimes, a community needs a champion, a runner who has the patience, the passion, and the skill to put all the knowledge together into the ultimate run. One of those communities is Ratchet Clank. Dozens of runners have forever changed the landscape of the run. But throughout its history, time and time again, a champion has risen above and led the way, grabbing the torch and leading the community to new ground. Today, we look at the speedrun history of Ratchet Clank and the heroes who led the way. Welcome to Speed Dogs. Ratchet & Clank was released for the PlayStation 2 back in 2002, and featured its dynamic protagonist duo, you guessed it, Ratchet and Clank. On their galaxy-wide quest to stop the evil Chairman Drek from destroying innocent planets for profit, the team visits plenty of locales, including, but not limited to, Velden, Novalis, Kerwin, Eudora, Blarg Station, Rilgar, Umbris, Battalia, Gaspar, Orxon, Pokitaru, Hoven, Oltanis, Gemlik Station, Quartu, and many more. Access to these locations are locked behind an infobot that can be bought or found on each stage, meaning players have to land on a planet, navigate the level, grab the infobot, and head back to their ship to progress. Ratchet navigates these stages with a slick set of tools, weapons, acrobatic maneuvers, and his trusty wrench. The main moves you need to know are his side flip, his long jump, his high jump, his hover, and his hyperstrike. With that out of the way, let's get started. Back in 2004, only a few years after the game's release, members on Speed Demos Archive were already looking at speedrunning Ratchet & Clank. Speed Demos Archive, or SDA, was the go-to place for speedruns, being one of the largest and most active websites centered around speedrunning back in the 90s and 2000s. SDA was home to a long list of games with curated speedrun videos, a knowledge base for notes and tricks for those games, and most importantly, a forum for users to collaborate and chat about routes, tricks, and glitches for their favorite speed games. While many expressed interest in doing or seeing a Ratchet & Clank speedrun, one thing was clear: this game was going to be tough to run. You see, while SDA hosted videos of cool speedruns, they had a board of approvals that sorted through submissions and held every run to a strict set of rules. While the board mainly prevented low-effort speedruns from appearing on its pages, it also enforced a few crazy rules, like no death abuses and no out-of-bounds tricks. The biggest rule that applied to Ratchet & Clank, though, was a rule that stated, if a category requires the game to be completed before you can play the specific game mode, that category cannot be submitted to SDA until a regular speedrun is approved to the site. This effectively blocked games with New Game Plus modes until a regular any% run was submitted. For Ratchet & Clank, the any% run was daunting, requiring players to collect several tens of thousands of bolts, the currency, in order to afford the weapons and gadgets required to beat the game. This meant slowing the run down significantly, while runners grinded for money, while having to cut corners wherever they could to save money and time. In Challenge Mode, also known as New Game Plus, players kept all of their weapons and upgrades, as well as bolts, making the run significantly faster and easier. You still have to unlock the gadgets and the infobots normally though. While the conversation was hot into 2005, runners gave up on the idea before anyone put any serious effort into the run. Out of nowhere, 2 years later, runner Synux revives the thread to announce that after some practice and routing, he has completed an any% run in about 2.5 hours. He posts his route notes for the world to see, and sets about trying to improve his time. With this breath of fresh air, many names make a reappearance, and with a renewed vigor, we see the first actual attempts to speedrun Ratchet & Clank. Runners are posting glitches and tricks, and talking about routing out bolts on each planet. During this discussion, a runner named RJ Waters vows to do a segmented run in order to put up the best quality run for SDA submission. Another runner, Sonar, takes charge and starts gathering and organizing the data to aid RJ Waters in their efforts. During this process, Sonar discovers two major glitches that are incredibly useful for Ratchet & Clank speedruns. The first is dubbed Ghost Ratchet Glitch. When using the Swingshot gadget to pull yourself to a node, if you use it right when you touch a death surface, like the mud on Umbrus, you trick the game into thinking that Ratchet is dead, while also pulling him up to his destination. This puts you in a ghost state, where Ratchet can move through walls while jumping, meaning runners can essentially skip to the end of the stage if they can find a suitable location to perform the glitch. The second glitch was discovered in the third game of the series, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal. Because the games have similar engines, the trick also works in Rack 1. By walking up to a wall and throwing down an object, in this case a decoy from the decoy glove, the object will push Ratchet through walls, allowing runners to squeeze through barriers if the walls aren't too thick. With these two tricks, RJ Waters was set to complete Ratchet & Clank in record time. The process was slow, but in the end, RJ Waters produced a segmented 1:11:56 any percent time on July 27, 2008. The run was praised and approved, but within a month, the Ratchet & Clank threads on SDA went silent. The community moved on to other games. RJ Waters had discovered several major tricks in his run that saved him a lot of time and headache. The first major trick is called slope intercepts. Slope intercept jumping is a trick that allows runners to perform a high jump out of a hover, off of slope terrain that is normally impossible to stand on. With precise timing and specific locations on a wall's collision, runners can scale mountains, literally, and get significant height quickly. Using these slope intercepts, or SIs, RJ is able to skip directly to the end of both Eudora and Gaspar by jumping over the barriers that separate the end of the stage from the landing ship. Next, RJ shaved off a lot of time off of Gemlik Station with two tricks. RJ does some clever SI jumps to make it out of bounds and skip half the level. He also skips the quirk fight, saving himself 2 to 3 minutes. Lastly, RJ Waters is able to skip getting the Hologuise gadget. The Hologuise is used on Core 2 and Drex Fleet. On Core 2, RJ found a way to glide up the slide to the end of the level, skipping the entire planet. On Drex Fleet, RJ uses his bomb glove to throw explosives and disable the guarded force field barriers without the need for the gadget. In skipping the Hologuise, RJ cuts out the race on Iridia and all of Kalibo 3, as well as the second path on Novalis. Considering that this was an any percent run, RJ was able to cut out a lot of the game from the run, even without the benefits of New Game Plus. The route and tricks that RJ laid out here would be the foundation for future runs to come. The thread would lay dormant for another 4 years. Towards the end of 2012, we finally start to see some more activity with Ratchet & Clank. Along with new users chatting in the SDA forums, we also see runners racing the game on Speedruns Live. Finally, a real community of runners is starting to develop around the game, just in time for SDA's stream charity event, Awesome Games Done Quick 2013, where Synux will be running Ratchet & Clank 1 New Game Plus. On January 6, 2013, one of the original Ratchet & Clank speedrunners from the early days of the forums, Synux, completes Ratchet & Clank any percent New Game Plus in 1 hour, 16 minutes, and 38 seconds, in one of the opening runs for the marathon.
1:16:38.
Plagued by technical difficulties, Synux manages to cobble together this speedrun for the event. Unfortunately, you may notice that this run, which is supposed to be easier with New Game Plus, was slower than RJ's any percent run from 5 years earlier. Most of his route was the same as RJ Waters' run, just without some of the tricks he found difficult, such as the Gaspar SI and the Ghost Ratchet glitch. After AGDQ 2013, a new stream of runners started popping up in the SDA thread, such as Classida, Orc is Awesome, Caveman DCJ, Lincolnito, and Infi. Most of the people watching Synux's run realized that it wasn't really an optimized run and would require some attention to get it to its full potential. Somehow, Synox's subpar run would end up driving more people to running Ratchet & Clank in an effort to optimize it. Together, they would build a new Any% and New Game Plus route, quickly finding new tricks like skipping the Trespasser on Iridia and the Hydro Displacer on Blarg. With these developments, Caveman eventually pulled off a 5240 in New Game Plus in the first few weeks after Synox's run, then a 4817 just a few weeks later. On Gemlick Station, Caveman found a way to clip into the elevator, skipping the last part of the level just before Quark. Similar to the skips on Gemlick, runner Clasida found a clip on Rilgar that lets runners swim from the start, through the rock wall, and straight to the elevator that leads to the end of the level. Eventually, after a dry streak of only finding small time saves, Infi would come out with a new major sequence break, skipping half of Orxon with Gadgetbot clipping, saving around 2 minutes. This led to Caveman coming back with a 4650, then Infi getting a 4501 not long after. Infi's run was really good for its time, and even though it has potential for time save, it was the first time Ratchet 1 saw a decent amount of optimization. After a few months of intense work, most of the New Game Plus runners would move on to other games and categories. After finding the first wave of tricks and basic time saves, the top runners put the game down and abandoned it once again. The other categories, like All Gold Bolts and regular Any%, needed some love as well, after all. At this point, most of the discussion for Ratchet & Clank speedrunning moved away from the SDA forums. With the advent of Twitch and Speedruns Live, runners were splintering off into multiple directions. In order to maintain a centralized community, one of the runners from the forums, Cyprys, aka Sippy, created and maintained a Skype group for Ratchet & Clank speedrunning. A few months later, during the summer of 2013, on the west coast of the United States of America, a young man finds himself out of work for a month with nothing to do. His roommate, who just so happens to be speedrunner and Super Smash Bros. Melee competitor Silent Wolf, suggests he picks up speedrunning. During a trip to the local half-priced books, a young man stumbles across a copy of Ratchet & Clank for the PlayStation 2. With this rendezvous with Destiny, the Ratchet & Clank community would get their first champion, Ticeman12.
Then I went and looked up speedruns for it, and I found the Synox run, and I was like, well, this is pure absolute garbage. I wonder if there's like anything better out there, and I found Infi's run. And Infi is like another person who like is very... I feel like a lot of the people nowadays don't know who he is, but I was like, okay, this guy is like actually super sick.
The Ratchet & Clank community had collected a bunch of tricks and strategies, but the top runners for New Game Plus left the game without truly pushing the category. Ticeman, seeing the leftover potential in the game, went looking for more time to save. Within a few weeks, Ticeman had discovered some huge tricks, namely full Orxon Clank skip, Ultanis Grind Boot skip, the Velden 2 SI, a crazy SI on Hoven, and a clip into the Thruster Pack shop on Pokitaru. Together, these tricks save several minutes, especially the Orxon Clank skip, which saves about 3 minutes alone over the method Infi found earlier, which only skipped half the level.
I just thought like a little outside the box. Like I was just like, because the game is just like very freeform. You know, like there's just like if you like think about something, like I've always thought about like Ratchet is that like if you really think that like a skip or like something is like possible, it probably is possible. Like it's just like you have to just like figure out what it is. And like that was just like kind of how I viewed the game, and like it just like helped me a lot in terms of like figuring out stuff.
Around the end of June, Ticeman started grinding attempts, trying to get a perfect run that used all of the new tricks and didn't make any major mistakes. Catching up to Caveman and Infi, he soon blasted past them with the help of his new tricks, as well as his superior movement. You see, by chaining together long jumps and side flips, it's possible to maintain your high speeds as well as gain a bit of speed with every jump. With better speed management, Ticeman was way ahead of his previous competitors. With his Hoven SI, Ticeman maneuvered behind a mountain at the start of the level and did a series of SI jumps to climb the entire mountain in order to shortcut the entire stage. With deceptive collision boxes, these jumps are incredibly difficult, but Ticeman wasn't going to settle for less than the best.
And so like I had that strat. I had my the Hoven strat too, which was like insane because like I was very close to just finding the like regular slope intercept for Hoven, which is like way less complicated. Like the one that I did was like had like 20 SIs in a row, where if you messed one of them up, you would die a lot of times.
On Ultanis, Ticeman found out that you can get on the underside of the Magnet Boots platform and still hit the button from the other side. During the ride, the platform flips and dumps Ratchet out of bounds, allowing runners to maneuver to the Infobot trigger. By doing this, Ticeman skips 80% of the stage, most importantly, the slow grind boot section. Infi took note of Ticeman finding all these new strats and got a free world record with the time of 42:09 by using the new Orxon and Ultanis skip. This wouldn't stop Ticeman though, and he kept grinding to get a run with all the new tricks. On July 29th, 2013, after a month of grinding, Ticeman finishes a run in 38:46.
Oh shit, that's not right. Alright, so it's probably off by like 6 seconds from that. So it's like 38:47 or 38:48. But still, I fucking did it! Fucking sub 39.
He is one of the most iconic figures in this history. His run was considered legendary at the time. We were all blown away by it.
It's just crazy the kind of stuff he does. I mean, Hoven SI is probably the most impressive thing he ends up doing in that run. But there were just so many SIs you had to do throughout the game, and if you messed up any of them, you're just dead. So it really is wild to see, one, how skilled he was back then, and two, how far the game has come along since his time period.
He just went all out with the strats, did all the strats that everyone else was too afraid to do at the time, I suppose. Was definitely in a league of his own.
Ticeman was exactly what the community needed, a player with passion and skill who could show them what the speedrun could be. This run would inspire a generation of runners, glitch hunters, and strat finders to bring Ratchet and Clank into a golden age of speedrunning. But after setting the stage for Revolution, Ticeman would retire from Ratchet runs. He was satisfied with his performance, and without immediate competition, our first champion bows out. In the months that followed, the Skype group that Cyprys had started began to grow. Now that Ticeman had disappeared, the other runners had to study Ticeman's run to learn his tricks. Cyprys led the charge and found new strats of his own. Using his knowledge of the Blarg Station map layout, Cyprys theorized that it would be possible to clip out of bounds from an area right next to the grind boots and jump right into the room with the Infobot, skipping the need to backtrack and providing a more consistent clip for the Infobot. Running over the route with the fine-tooth comb, runners were looking for more and more optimizations. As 2013 came to a close, there were two runners at the forefront of the pack, Cyprys and Nuka. While they had still not surpassed Ticeman, these two were hot on the trail, mastering the movement and finding new tricks to push the time down. Finally, in January of 2014, the two best runners were ready. With a faster way to do Ticeman's Hoven SI and a faster Blarg Station, Cyprys took Tice's crown with a 38:30, and the next day, a 37:42. Cyprys's lead would be short-lived, however, as a major change was on the horizon. During this time, a few key runners would join the community and start making a name for themselves, namely S-Laughter, or Slaughter, and PrinceVorteX. Around late 2013, Slaughter had found a technique that allowed you to side flip infinitely on Iridia, allowing you to gain immense amounts of height. Sadly, this technique required the thruster pack, and since the thruster pack couldn't be obtained before Pokitaru, this was useless. Runners Clippy and Sippy were trying to figure out how this technique worked, and ended up finding a massive new use for the PDA item, infinite jumps. In Ratchet and Clank, there's an item that can be obtained later in the game called the PDA, but runners can start out with it in New Game Plus. The sole purpose of the PDA is to provide the player with an ammo shop anywhere in the game world, albeit at a steeper price. But the PDA also holds some interesting properties, most of which were overlooked during development. You see, if the player opens the PDA mid-air, Ratchet enters a grounded state. By abusing the hover mechanic of the thruster pack, runners could enter a hover and then swing the wrench. Upon swinging the wrench, runners could do a jump. Now, if they then open the PDA again, the game would give Ratchet his hover state back, allowing him to swing the wrench and repeat the cycle, allowing players to jump infinitely. The only issue was that it was only possible with a thruster pack, so runners wouldn't be able to use it before Pokitaru. This technique immediately had a few uses, namely, the gap that separates Ratchet from the gas bar infobot on Battaglia and a shortcut for Gimlick Station. Back in the day, Ticeman had discovered a method to skip grind boots altogether. With his Oltanis skip, he was halfway there, but on Battaglia, there was a problem. Ticeman had a crazy idea to do a hover along the grind rail. This was incredibly dangerous and unfortunately too slow. But now, with this thruster IJ strat, grind boot skip was really possible, but it required a bit of a reroute. The new route would look something like this. The runner arrives on Battaglia and goes left for the Orxon infobot, then leaves. Heading to Orxon, runners do the Orxon Clank skip and get the Pokitaru infobot. After heading to Pokitaru and escorting the guide to the end of the level, runners pick up the thruster pack. Unfortunately, runners need the pilot's helmet to finish Pokitaru, and that happens to be on Gaspar. So, runners head back to the ship, fly back to Battaglia, use the thruster pack to reach the Gaspar infobot, leave, grab the helmet, and finally head back to Pokitaru to wrap up there. With this new route, Nuka takes the world record for the first time on February 11th with a 37:14. Cyprys would take it back the same day with a 36:39, but the competition was on. With this new strat, the next month would be a flurry of world record times as both runners used their new toys to go faster than ever.
I always told Nuka that he was sick, though. I always thought Nuka was super good. But I always I like partially jokingly, like half serious, half joking, would talk shit to Cyprys a lot, even though Cyprys is a cool guy.
Throughout February, Nuka would spend time lowering the run down from a 36:37 to a 34:45 just by playing well. However, another reroute was on the horizon, which would change how Rack 1 was played. After Nuka got his 34:45, Slaughter would show off a new PDA technique which he would dub Speedy A. Opening the PDA during a long jump stops Ratchet, but conserves his momentum. Runners could chain together multiple long jumps in a small area by opening the PDA over and over. He would also find a technique called PDA glide, which allowed runners to conserve the speed from the long jumps into a longer, faster glide than normal. These PDA glides could also be cancelled with a Speedy A into more long jumps, giving runners more options for movement. Slaughter had been finding all these things, but he was convinced that there was another secret out there waiting for him. The thruster pack infinite jump simply wasn't good enough for him, and it would save a lot of time to not have to do the backtracking to Pokitaru and Battaglia. You see, Slaughter was actually playing on the PS3 version, which most runners had abandoned. The Oltanis grind boot skip was fixed on the newer version, so PS3 runners still had to grab the grind boots. Because of this, Slaughter couldn't compete with the rest of the community, so he turned his efforts towards glitch hunting. In March, Slaughter found what he was looking for. By holding down L1 through the PDA menu, the button for first-person mode, it was possible to gain a wrench swing similar to the hover, allowing runners to do IJs anywhere. This would open up the PS3 route as you could do infinite jumps on Oltanis, allowing PS3 runners to skip the grind boots, as well as a bunch of time savers elsewhere. This was good for Slaughter, since he could actually run the game now, and it was good for the route since he no longer had to backtrack to Battaglia and Pokitaru. Without a pack upgrade, Ratchet will lose height with every IJ, but gets more distance on jumps. With the helipack though, runners can do high jumps and gain height with every IJ. With these new abilities, the world of Ratchet 1 really opened up.
The infinite jumps and Speedy A-ing and PDA gliding, stuff like that. It just made it so much fun just to move around in the game, and just separated it from like every other game I was playing.
With all of these crazy new movement abilities at their disposal, the golden age of Ratchet & Clank was in full force. Runners weren't that interested in practicing precise tricks, because they were having too much fun getting a grip on the movement tools they had discovered. Some runners would later refer to this time as the freestyle era, as runners would come up with their movements on the fly. Instead of finding the optimal path, it was more important to do flashy techniques and swag strats, as the movement was both fluid and fast.
The skateboarder era, kind of, where it wasn't so much of a who can get there the fastest, it's more of like a who can get there the coolest, and it just so happens that the fastest way was also the coolest way.
Back when I started learning Ratchet & Clank, the community wasn't really a practice community. It was more of just like, let's do runs to see how good we can get. Let's just not like practice and like practice doing shortcuts. It was a lot of movement, like a lot of based on just how good your movement was and how you could edit your movement throughout the run. So a lot of the times we would just like watch other people run and be like, oh, that was really nice. Like, check out this, watch the way I do this.
During all of these discoveries, one thing remained the same. Nuka Duka was at the forefront of the community, pushing the fastest time further and further down. With the new route, he would continue to dominate the category. He got a PB of 33.44 at the start of April with the new route, and a month later in May, he would lower it to a 32.58 just by playing well. Around this time, Nuka decided to search for Ratchet & Clank speedruns in Japanese. What he found was a Ratchet & Clank 3 New Game Plus run by Silence3246. This run was still so far ahead of anything else the Ratchet community had ever seen before, and would end up inspiring Ratchet 1 runners to push the meta of movement even further. In Silence's run, he would often chain a lot of movements together to get around the map. This pursuit of optimizing movement changed how Ratchet runners looked at the games ever since. After this, Nuka would start implementing a lot more of the PS3 tricks that use the PDA, such as the infinite jumps on Velden and Ovalis, and certain SpeedDA chains. Slaughter ended up figuring out a new Umbrus route that would skip the checkpoints, and therefore the save and load at the end. It was also found by Orc that it was both easier and faster to do infinite jumps to start the SI on Hoven over Ticeman's older and more difficult method. In the months that came after the PDA discoveries, Nuka lowered the record from a 36.37 in February down to a 32.28 on July 6th.
Dang, another PB. And that was only a PB because of how good Mike Pokitaro was?
Nuka was never satisfied with his play, always hungry for that faster time. In this golden age of Ratchet, Nuka was the second champion.
Ticeman is a very hard man to impress. To my knowledge, Nuka is the only one that was able to impress him with his skill.
While he started off primarily as a glitch hunter, Slaughter was a competent runner in his own right. Having an intimate knowledge of the game, Slaughter would eventually surpass Nuka with a 31.55 on August 26, 2014.
Yes! 31.56. Oh yeah. Oh.
But it wasn't just skill that got him there. Slaughter got a significant boost from the PS3 version of the game. Up until this point, all of the runs mentioned so far have been on the PS2 version of the game. However, the HD trilogy for Ratchet & Clank released all the way back in 2012. The PS3 version of the game benefits from having faster load times and faster and more consistent menus. There were two big problems that had turned runners away from PS3. First, PS3 decoy clipping was harder, and none of the setups found on PS2 worked for PS3. Since most of the runners didn't play on PS3, new setups were never found. The second big problem was that the Ultanis grind boot skip doesn't work on PS3. Before infinite jumps were discovered, PS3 runs had to get grind boots and do the slow and tedious section on Ultanis. For these reasons, most runners up until this point didn't even consider playing on PS3.
The main thing though, I guess like in general, was clips. They were a lot harder on PS3 than PS2, so and this was all before PDA and stuff as well. So these clips were harder, and we just kind of like felt, I think, that even though the loading differences were faster on PS3, like this stuff would even out, and so it'd just be better to run on PS2 anyway.
Since the community had grown in 2014, there were now more runners who had access to the PS3 version. Slaughter started out on PS3, but PrinceVorteX moved over to PS3 when Cyprys got him a digital version. With the discovery of IJs, grind boot skip was no longer a major issue. With the faster menus, opening and closing the PDA was almost instant on the PS3 version, which saved a significant chunk of time over the PS2 version over the course of the run. Slaughter used that to his advantage, as well as the faster loads between planets, to finally overtake Nuka. Nuka wouldn't go down without a fight, however. A few days later, on August 31st, Nuka tied Slaughter's time, beating him by less than a second. Nuka was able to catch up to Slaughter because he was technically a better runner. Nuka's skill was unmatched, but he was stuck on his old PS2 console. Because of this, Slaughter and Vortex would slowly slip away as more time and effort was put into the PS3 route. The final nail in the coffin for PS2 was a PS3 PAL exclusive trick that was discovered called the Pyro glitch. For some reason, most likely an issue with converting the 50 FPS PAL version to 60 FPS in the HD trilogy, the flamethrower weapon, the Pyrocitor, deals damage on every frame. This is especially useful in the final boss fight against Drek. Using this Pyro glitch, the PAL PS3 version immediately saved 20 seconds. On top of the other nice time saves, and by eliminating most of the downsides of PS3, the PS2 version just couldn't keep up. Since he was the best runner with the PAL version on PS3, PrinceVorteX shot ahead of the rest, taking world record on November 19th, 2014 with a 31:27.
Oh, 31:30.
It should also be mentioned that using the digital version of the game over the disc saves around a minute on top of all the other time saves. Over the next 2 months, Vortex would use the Pyro glitch and his digital PAL version to push the record a handful of times, and would be the first person to pass the sub-30 barrier. On January 12th, 2015, Vortex achieves a 29:55.
Oh my god.
And things started to become definitively faster on PS3. It definitely became the preferred option, especially when Vortex took over as the world record holder, because I don't think people would say he was the better runner in terms of skill than Nuka. I think once he started taking the records, that's when the sort of separation began to happen between PS3 and PS2. Before that, it was you could play on either version and you could get the record.
Still on PS2, Nuka continues to run the game. In February of 2015, Nuka comes across a strange and useful glitch. On certain planets, namely the ones with liquid on the surface, like Rilgar with its water or Umbrus with its mud, the liquid surface is programmed a bit strangely. If you walk off a ledge and initiate a long jump or a side flip over the surface, the game thinks Ratchet is constantly grounded. This allows runners to repeatedly cancel side flips into long jumps, back into side flips, back into long jumps, infinitely, gaining massive amounts of speed and height. This maneuver, aptly named Infinite Long Jumps, or ILJs, requires a crazy amount of mashing and some precise timing. Runners would start trying this glitch on every planet to see where it worked. Slaughter figured out that his infinite side flips trick from 2013 worked the same way as ILJs, and figured out that you could do it on Hoven, removing the difficult Hoven SI from the run. Since the meta had shifted to the PS3, Nuka's time was coming to a close. There were a few PS2 holdouts, for one reason or another, but top competitors had to play on PS3. But Nuka was still the best runner in terms of pure skill, and he was going to prove it. With the discovery of ILJs, Nuka made a major push to lower his PB. After a few weeks of grinding, Nuka was ready for his magnum opus. What really separated Nuka from the other runners was his consistency. Nuka rarely dropped his movement, or any tricks. Because PS3 was faster, PS3 runners had more leeway when it came to mistakes. Those runners had skill, for sure, but they also had a few unintentional deaths, bonks, or just plain old fumbles. Nuka was practiced.
Like I said, Nuka is just an absolute beast when he wants to be, and he really wanted to be at that time. He didn't have access to PS3, which everyone else has switched to already at the time, but his competitiveness was just so fierce that he wanted to show off his skill level and what the ideal run should look like, even though he doesn't have the fastest version of the game. He still wanted that level of skill to show through, even though he was still on PS2.
It's February 28th, 2015. Nuka is on a great run. With a good early game, Nuka is within a few seconds of his best ever time. After nailing the ILJs on Umbris, Nuka is leaving the planet before the 10-minute mark. This is now the fastest run Nuka has ever been on. Holding it together through Battaglia, Nuka also gets godlike RNG on the Pokitaru pilot section. Nuka shows off his slick movement on Orxon 2, chasing the infobot without breaking a sweat. On Hoven, Nuka gets a quick kill on the ship and keeps moving forward. Again, with his practice movement, Nuka keeps trucking along, nailing every trick in the book. In the end, after a clean Drek fight, Nuka finishes the run with a 30-28.
There you go, another improvement. I wasn't expecting that at all. Like, when I started this stream, I just threw together this layout. Like, I didn't have a layout ready. I just kind of just threw that on there and was going to do an 90% run. And then I ended up getting a PB in Ninja Plus.
So yeah, he just kept grinding away at that game until he pulled out that miraculous run. That was another one of those runs that stood out in the community. Like, he was basically the second coming of Ticeman. That was another one of those legendary runs that just blew everyone away. He was once again just on a different skill level to what everyone else was capable of at the time. I think he pretty much stopped running after that, or at least taking the game as seriously, which, you know, it's an awesome way to go out.
That was a really good run. Yeah, a lot of people call that like the best Rack 1 run for a long time. Is a really good run. Like, even these 28s here, and they're minutes faster, but they weren't, I guess, as impressive as Nuka's 30-28.
Yeah, that was probably one of the best moving times. Like, movement-wise, it was one of the best runs. And also, like, he hit a lot of the tricks pretty consistently in that run. I think there's only a few planets that he really just, like, messed up on. But, like, even for, like, what we talked about, like, as Slaughter would call it, like, the skateboard era, like, only messing up a few planets in a run is, like, really extraordinary.
But the run that really captured me, that made me, like, think that this was a really sick run, was Nuka Duka's 30-28. This run stood for, like, a really long time, and to me was, like the defining moment where, like, I went, wow, this game is actually getting super optimized, and, like, the movement's getting to, like, a whole nother level. And this was at the time when he got this time, sub 30 wasn't even doable. So, like, he got within, like, you know, a 30-second time span of, like, perfection, essentially. So I watched that run, and that really inspired me for sure. Like, I watched that run so many times.
While this run was just over 30 seconds off a world record, the community was amazed. In a later retiming, it was estimated that Nuka's 30-28 would have been a high 26-minute time on PS3, a full 3 minutes faster than the world record at the time.
Vortex and Slaughter at the time were running on PS3, whereas Nuka, who, you know, no offense to the other runners, was miles ahead of everyone else. And his time without the load, like, if he was playing on PS3, that 30-28 would have been a world record by well over 3 minutes, I think.
I think on a PS3 that would have been like a 26-ish, maybe a low 27. And I don't even know when world record catches up to that. So the quality of his run was just so far beyond everyone else.
Version differences were becoming like a big problem right around that era. And Vortex's version was, I think, about 1.5 minutes faster than mine. And my version was about 2 minutes faster than Nuka's. So when Nuka had 30-28, really that was like miles better than our other runs.
The only real flaws in Nuka's run was some lost time on Battaglia for not doing speedy A's, a small mistake with the clip on Gemlik, and a weird clip on Orxon that forced Nuka under the stage to his death. Neither of these things lost him too much time, not more than 5 seconds apiece. Because it was one of the only glaring faults, and because of how rare that clip is, the Orxon clip that killed Nuka would forever live on, known to the community as the Nuka. With this insane run, Nuka took a step back from speedrunning Ratchet & Clank. While he was still around in the community, Nuka never again made a serious push to lower his personal best. With his exit, PS2's fate was sealed. As the year went on, a few more runners rose to the surface. The any percent world record holder, Raikaru, jumped into New Game Plus as well. Raikaru and Vortex would trade the world record back and forth a few times, but overall, the remainder of 2015 was pretty quiet. With the creation of the Discord, once again owned and operated by Cyprys, grandfather of the community, faces new and old made an appearance. One of those faces was ThaRixer, aka Ricky. Back in 2012, before the start of the New Game Plus history, Ricky and Cyprys were old friends. Together, they challenged each other to pick up Ratchet & Clank any percent speedruns. However, as you might remember, in 2012, the any percent route was incredibly difficult and hadn't changed much from RJ Waters' run. Ricky thought the run was just too hard and quickly gave up, while Cyprys kept at it. But as 2016 came around, Ricky decided to give New Game Plus a try. With his talent and dedication, Ricky became a top player in no time. At the start of 2016, Vortex, Raikaru, Slaughter, and Ricky were all trading the world record back and forth. While the others were simply trying to clean up their play, Ricky was trying to emulate Nuka. The PS3 runners were still a few minutes behind that high 26 time that Nuka pulled off.
I looked at Nuka's run and I tried to copy everything that he'd done, and you can tell, and like, since Nuka's run, there was kind of like a gap in like, we're trying to get 26 kind of thing, because Nuka's run added up to 26 at the time. So I was essentially just trying to close a gap, trying to replicate what he did on PS2, try to get that with the current PS3 loads. So when I started getting into it, I was trying to just replicate what Nuka had gotten at first. And I just started getting like better and better and better at like chaining the movement together, and I started understanding the movement more as I explored how everything chained together so smoothly and easily, and like it was so good. And I just got better and better, and I ended up taking the record. Probably, I think within my first 2 weeks, I got the record, and then I just kept going because I was just not done there.
Within a few months, Ricky had a handle on all the tricks and techniques and was ready to ascend to the next level. With Nuka backing off from speedrunning, Ratchet & Clank needed a new champion, and Ricky knew what he had to do. Slowly but surely, Ricky and Slaughter pulled ahead. Making huge strides in optimization, Ricky and Slaughter pushed the world record down over a minute and a half in the month of February, taking it from 28:05.
And he's dead. Let's see for ourselves. I don't think it's world record, but I'm definitely fucking happy with that. Let's see.
To 26:22.
Determination, bitch! Let's go. That should be world record, I think. Yeah, that's world record. Yeah! Let's go.
This last time, the 26:22, would mark the beginning of a new era. On February 16th, 2016, Ricky would take the world record and not let go. This was no longer a four-way battle for supremacy. Ricky grabbed the baton from Nuka and took off, leaving everyone else in the dust.
And then I sort of just like would watch Ricky and like became more of a fan of Ricky because like what Ricky was doing was like so amazing. He is one of the most talented gamers I have ever seen. Like as far as like he picks up games so fast and he just puts like all of his heart into them, and you can just tell like how good of a player he is.
On February 19th, a new discovery was made. There was an idea that was floating around for quite some time. In the game's theme of an over-the-top weapon inventory at your disposal, there's a weapon called the Walloper, an electric boxing glove which lunges you forward. People thought, wouldn't it be funny if we could maintain the speed boost we get from the Walloper punch? No one took it too seriously, but the idea made the rounds. Until one day, when Slaughter let Maxis in on the joke. Maxis was a newer player in the community. While others might have thought about it and laughed, Maxis wanted to test it out. After doing some tests, Maxis found out that it's possible to open up the in-level movies mid-punch. After skipping the movie, Ratchet is in a state called a standing neutral, meaning that Ratchet isn't moving forward, but he is storing the momentum from the Walloper punch. The speed starts decreasing the longer he stands still, so runners have a small window to input a lag flip and start a movement chain that maintains all the momentum of the weapon. Since the game has a set speed limit for Ratchet, there is technically a ceiling on how fast players can go. But with this Walloper tech, runners can instantly reach that top speed and keep it as they move through the level.
And particularly like in gaining speed, that was one thing that you would have to like do a bunch of long jumps and neutral long jumps to gain your momentum before. But then with wallopers, it was like everything there was instant. The buildup was gone. And you just had to go top speed from one place to another. And you could mark like the area of PS3 maybe completely killing PS2 right here.
But this wouldn't be the only big discovery during Ricky's reign. During a run, Ricky realized too late that he had accidentally triggered the deplanetizer glitch as he glided into the final boss fight with Drek. You see, the deplanetizer glitch was known about for quite some time. If you defeat Drek in a playthrough, but don't finish the game by hitting the button, a flag is set in the game's memory to load in the big cannon in the middle of the boss platform. This covers up the timer reset button, making the final Drek fight much more difficult, as runners have to defeat Drek within a shorter time limit. This flag will persist in memory until a run is completed or until the console is powered off. Maxis had discovered how to get over the death barrier on Velden 2 earlier that day, and taught Ricky how to do it as well. While practicing this, Ricky forgot to hit the green button and finish the game. Now, during a real run, Ricky glided onto the platform ready for an intense fight. But when he got there, the platform was empty. Drek was nowhere in sight. Somehow, by doing ground pound in-level movies over the death barrier and getting behind the final boss platform, Ricky bypassed the trigger that spawned in the final boss. Coupled with the deplanetizer glitch, Ricky was now free to walk up to the green button and play the final cutscene, completing the game without having to fight Chairman Drek. In a glorious accident, Ricky not only saved 30 or so seconds on this final planet, but also removed a potential run killer from the category in one fell swoop.
There we go. Where's Drek? Where's Drek? Where's Drek? Ah! Maxis! Oh my god, he left. Maxis is not here. Wait! Wait. Oh my god! We skipped Drek!
This also eliminated the need to play on the PAL version, as the pyro glitch was primarily for the Drek fight. With this glitch and the walloper technique, Ricky was ready to take this game to the next level. Around this time, PS2 runner Gamma Blaster found a more consistent way to maintain ILJs. Originally, runners were doing ILJs by mashing X, R1, R2, and D-pad inputs, which put a major strain on their hands. Now, after the initial X press, runners can alternate between R1 and R2 in an easy rhythm. With this new technique, more runners could perform ILJs, and for longer. The new ILJ method opened up a new Umbrus route that had been theorized for a while, but never properly executed, doing ILJs straight from the ship to the boss. Along with this, a new method of performing Ghost Ratchet was also found. By opening the in-level movie menu while Ratchet is in his drowning animation, it's possible to jump out of the surface and make it back to safety. With the new ILJ and Ghost Ratchet method, the last use for the swing shot was scratched off the list, allowing runners to skip the detour on Kerwin, saving around 30 seconds. 2 weeks after Drek Skip was found, Ricky lowers the record down to a 25:30 on March 19th.
Alright, we'll take it. 25:30. Okay. This run's endgame is actually ridiculous. I'll give it that. The endgame in this run is perfect. I don't think I made a single mistake from Hoven and downwards. There we go, boys. We got a PB.
Over the next month, Ricky led the charge to reroute the movement for the entire run, as walloper punches changed the landscape of the entire game. In years past, in the freestyle age of 2014 and 2015, the movement route was largely built on building speed and holding onto it wherever possible. But now, with the ability to reach max speed in an instant, the meta was shifting to just holding on to as much speed as possible.
He just kind of brought a whole new mindset to the game where, you know, in his opinion, it is all about going fast. For better or worse, that is, I think, the purest speedrunner mindset is faster no matter what. And so he kind of spawned the next generation of people who only wanted to optimize things.
When the walloper came in, like there was so much untapped potential, and I think Slaughter kind of fell off the map and didn't really feel like. I think he he felt like he achieved his goal, which, to be fair, his run was really, really great. I just felt like there was more to be done, and I wanted to explore the Walloper, which Maxis had found. And so I just pushed the game into like the 25 stage and the 24 stage, and basically the beginning of every movement chain was now, with the Walloper. And I thought that was really cool because you could start at full speed for almost any chain, which meant that whenever you were at top speed the whole time, your spacing and your movement was a bit more calculated. And so I ended up doing a lot of the same spacing, whereas when I was around 26, 27 minutes-ish, it was more free flow. So when I started pushing all the way down to 24, and when I got to 23, 43, this is when I was like, that's it. This is where it's going to stand for now.
Walloper punches made waves on essentially every stage. On Velden, runners could cross the large gaps in the beginning with ease and grace. On Novalis, runners could launch all the way into the Infobot cutscene from the other side of the river. On Kerwin, runners had the speed to now skip most of the early jumps, meaning fewer IJs to clear the gaps. The list goes on. Suffice to say, the run looked quite a bit different now. In this time of change, Ricky, the third champion, led the way forward. In March and April of 2016, Ricky would achieve times like 25:10, 24:27, 24:12, and 24:09. At the beginning of the year, the world record was at 28:45. Now, the man who imitated the legendary Nuka was forging his own path, taking the game to new heights. But just how far could he take it? Ricky would get a small PB on April 21st, but he knew he was playing hot. Now, with a personal best time of 24:06, Ricky was tantalizingly close to the sub 24. With plenty more time to save, Ricky kept pushing. Having clocked in over 3,000 attempts, Ricky was ready for the next milestone. After a clean early game, Ricky played it close to the vest, staying within a few seconds of his best segments. After Battaglia, Ricky was 22 seconds ahead of his PB. If he could just keep it together, the PB was in the bag. Ricky would hold steady, only losing about 5 or 6 seconds over the next 5 planets. With some solid times on Hoven and Gemlik though, Ricky was back to being 20 seconds ahead. After Core2, the real run was over. Ricky could coast through the infinite jump simulator portion of the run with relative ease, or so he thought. On Velden 2, Ricky fumbles the IJs at the start and has to start over. A minor time loss, but one that stung for sure. Ricky would complete this run in 23:43, a new world record by a huge 22.5 seconds.
Let's fucking go! Yes, dude. Holy shit, that Velden was bad. Oh my god, this could have been a 23:33. Oh, I choked Velden 2, dude! Look at the best seg compared to how much I lost on Velden 2. Still though, whatever, man. We got it.
Finally, having broken through the 24-minute barrier, Ricky felt pretty happy with his run. Still a perfectionist, he saw around 20 to 30 seconds left to save, but overall, he was satisfied with his time. While he vowed that he wasn't ready to leave the game, Ricky would soon put the game down to move back to speedrunning Jak 2.
For this run, I felt like I'd grinded my way all the way from when I picked up the game at 28:05, which was my first record, and then I had achieved like roughly 8-9 records since, and gotten all the way down to 23, which was pretty monumental. When it just felt kind of good that I felt in a way that I solo routed the Walloper alone in an era where I don't feel like anyone else was really trying to push the Walloper into the route. There was just a lot of untapped potential, and I just managed to push it out all the way down to 23:43, and that's just the time with that route. I was like, okay, that seems good to me. Like that seems like we're all I can do for now.
Without a champion, there was a lull in the community. No one else was capable of pushing the game in the same way that Ricky did. Things would continue, but the record would stand at 23:43 for quite some time. While Ratchet 1 quieted down, some of the other Ratchet games were heating up. In particular, Zem92, popular Ratchet series speedrunner, was sweeping the leaderboards. With 9 world record times across Ratchet 1, 2, 3, and All for One, Zem had a hold on some of the most popular categories in the series. Most importantly though, Zem had the New Game Plus world record in 2 of the 3 games in the original trilogy, only missing Ratchet 1. Zem made it his mission to take the last stronghold in the New Game Plus line, also grabbing a 10th world record for his collection, a feat never before seen in the community's history.
2016 was definitely my most dominant year in the Ratchet community. I want to say, what was it? I think I simultaneously held 10 main leaderboard world records.
Having started back in April of 2016, Zem picked up Rack 1 and started grinding his way to the top. In October though, Zem really put his nose to the grindstone. Ricky, in the spirit of competition, gave Zem all of his knowledge. The ball was in Zem's court now. But Zem was up to the task. A fierce competitor, he was relentless in his pursuit. Constantly practicing and doing runs, he would not stop until he had the New Game Plus world record. Luckily for Zem, a new time save would help him close the gap. Remember infinite long jumps? ILJs are performed over specific textures by doing a long jump, canceling it with a side flip, and then canceling that side flip with another long jump, continuously. A new technique, discovered by runner Cinna, would put a spin on the ILJ. Cinna flips, as they would be called, were the same as ILJs, except, instead of long jumping, runners cancel the side flip with another side flip, over and over and over again. While this doesn't give a lot of speed, it does give Ratchet a lot of height quickly. This technique is incredibly precise however, as the timing window is even smaller than the window for ILJs. Cinna flips were especially useful on the planet Rilgar, as performing ILJs didn't get runners enough height to reach the infobot at the top of the stage. With Cinna flips though, runners could save around 15 seconds, avoiding the need to do slope intercepts up the wall. Not to give Cinna flips too much credit, Zem put in a lot of effort to optimize his movement and master the tricks of the run. Zem would be the second person to achieve a 23-minute time, an incredible feat to be sure. But with this little extra boost, Zem was now well within the reach of his goal. Finally, on October 23, 2016, it happened. With a bit of a slow start, Zem is consistently 15 to 20 seconds behind Ricky, keeping pace with the legend, albeit from a distance. After Hoven though, Zem picks up speed. With the help of 3 gold splits back-to-back on Gemlik, Ultanis, and Core 2, Zem enters the final planet within 9 seconds of Ricky's world record. Lucky for Zem, Ricky's Velden 2 was sloppy, losing him 10 seconds to a false start at the beginning and doing too many infinite jumps to the end. This was the opportunity that Zem needed. Without wasting any time, Zem glides down to the final platform. Saving the full 10 seconds over Ricky, Zem comes in 1 second under the world record with a 23:42.
I did it! Oh my god! I also clapped really loudly and it hurt my ear. Yes! Oh shit!
He had done it. Zem was the first runner to hold the world record for New Game Plus across all 3 of the original Ratchet & Clank games, as well as simultaneously holding 10 unique world records across major categories in the series. While Zem can be considered a champion of the entire Ratchet & Clank trilogy, Zem's crusade for Rec 1 New Game Plus ends here. Having achieved his goal of taking the crown from Ricky, Zem was content to move on to other categories.
Zem was on a bit of a I want to beat every rack record, I don't care if I hold it. So he just, if you watch his run, he just kind of pulled that run like out of his ass. And he was just like, that's a 1 second record, I'm done.
Sometimes, in the absence of a champion, it's not a seasoned veteran who steps up to the plate to move the meta forward, but a newcomer, a fresh face. In 2016, there were plenty of new runners joining the Ratchet community. But one of them stood out. Inspired by Ricky, runner Scaff picked up the game around the end of 2016. By January of 2017, about a month after his first posted PB, Scaff would be the third person to achieve a 23-minute time. On January 21st, Scaff not only blew past the 24-minute mark, but after 173 attempts that day, Scaff took world record with a 23:41, beating Zem by less than a second.
Lose a bit of time, I think.
Fuck yes! 1 second, boys.
Oh my god, Grats!
Oh my god! Holy fuck, dude. Good job.
Oh my fucking goodness!
No.
No way, dude.
Time to get fucking global!
1 second!
Oh
my god.
Boss, we're in sync. Boss, we're in sync.
Even after losing 15 seconds on Umbris to a bad ILJ, Scaff was able to climb back up and just beat out Ricky and Zem. Besides clean gameplay, Scaff saved time with a solid Battaglia and a faster Hoven. For Hoven, Scaff performed infinite side flips from the start, instead of taking a detour to the side to do the flips. With a good shooting section, Scaff saved 7 seconds here, even over Ricky's gold split from his PB. On Velden 2, Scaff did 8 ground pound ILMs as opposed to Zem and Ricky's 10. These are done to jump over the vertical death plane in this void area, and by doing less, Scaff cut it dangerously close to the edge. But if not for this risky play, Scaff wouldn't have been able to make it to the final platform in time to snag the world record. Scaff was good, and had put a lot of effort into routing out specific movement patterns. Instead of just making things up on the fly, Scaff practiced where to start Walloper punches and what moves to do to build his movement chain. Like the second coming of Ticeman, Scaff, the 4th champion, took his place at the top of the food chain.
I mean, he was the only one that was really pushing the game at the time. Basically, before Ricky came back, he was the only one that was really pushing for optimizing the movement that was in the game, looking for new strats. He found a strat on Battaglia at the time based on a task that Nano Holler guys made, which I thought was super cool. That's probably the first time, and only to my memory, that we've ever had in the Rat community new RTA strats coming out of the tasks.
Yeah, Scaff was, I personally believe, was the last person to take the game to another level. Like, just one day when he pulled out his Battaglia IL, and I was just I had never felt that way watching the game ever since I had watched Ticeman, where I was just wow, I don't think I could ever be this good.
So Scaff, in terms of gameplay wise, he definitely also was one of the people that saw untapped potential with the game. He saw some new strats that weren't being utilized by older people, and he went ahead and just used them to save a lot of time. And he also optimized a lot of new movement. Scaff was really one of the, I kind of pushed the Walloper forward into the route, and this is how you do spacing, but I feel like Scaff really cemented this is really how you move and preserve your speed through everything. And that was really one of the key things about Scaff that was really good.
With the whole community behind him, Scaff continued pushing himself. With thousands of attempts over the next 2 months, Scaff lowered his sum of best over 30 seconds, down into sub 22. On March 5th, Scaff gets a 22:48, having pushed himself tirelessly all through February. After this run, Scaff would take a much needed break, but he vowed to come back again to clean up at least 20 or so seconds of easy time save. Finally, in September of that year, Scaff makes his return. With the fancy new HD capture card and a few new tricks up his sleeve, Scaff was ready to keep grinding away. The most important of these tricks was PDA side flips. Much like infinite jumps, PDA side flips abuse the first-person ability of the PDA in order to get another jump while midair. This time though, doing side flips out of the PDA means runners can skip the wrench swing and gain a lot of height very quickly because of it. Discovered around June of 2017, this new trick made waves in the run, as PDA side flips were used practically everywhere now, such as Kerwin, Gaspar, Orxon 2, Ultanis, Drex Fleet, and Velden 2. Since you could do these side flips over any surface, it made the run safer, as runners could recover if they missed a difficult jump. With the advent of PDA side flips, Scaff would push the time down from his 22:48 from March to a 21:55 on September 19th, 2017. Not only was this an important milestone at the time, Scaff was only 30 seconds behind his sum of best.
Yeah, so Scaff being as good as he was in NG+. It was probably the first time I saw someone playing the game and just thought, like, wow. He kind of blew a lot of people away. I think NG+ was good at the time, pretty good, but not. It was like pushing it to another level.
Scaff would continue to grind out more runs, putting in over 3,000 attempts since his return in September. He would get a 2134 with new route changes on Umbrus and Orxon 2, and cleaning up some difficult sections such as Battalia and Hoven. However, once again, a new discovery would help him lower his time even further. Pokitaru is one of the longest stages in the game, mainly because it's essentially an auto-scroller and an escort mission combined. Runners have to clear out all of the mean red fish along the path in order for the Poke Guy to move along. During the boat driving section, runners often sit atop the glass to avoid having to fight off enemies for the duration of the ride, but could this time be better spent? Using the Visibomb weapon, new runners Genki and Isaki would use that downtime to clear out enemies at the end of the stage with guided missiles. By holding the guy in the boat until all of the fish are cleared, he ends up warping to his final destination after reaching one of his path spots, saving around 15 seconds if done well. With this optimization, Scaff would achieve a 21:27 on November 27, 2017. Unfortunately, this would be the end of the road for our fourth champion. While he intended to keep grinding for a 21:10, Scaff would eventually put the game down before the end of the year and focus on school. A month or two before Scaff retired, Awesome Games Done Quick 2018's game submissions opened up. Throwing his hat in the ring, a familiar face reappears. Ricky decides to submit a few of his popular speed games, like Jak and Daxter, God of War, and so on. With the final slot, Ricky decides to go ahead and submit Rack 1, even though he hadn't played the game in over a year. Somehow, to his surprise, Ratchet & Clank was the one and only game that got accepted out of all the games he submitted. Well, except Dog's Life, that got in too. Ricky picked up the mantle once again, brushing off the rust that had built up for the last year and a half. In his absence, Scaff had shaved off 2 whole minutes from Ricky's last PB in 2016. Determined as ever, Ricky fervently ascended to the Ratchet & Clank summit once again, learning the new tricks and techniques that the community had found without him. As the marathon date approached, Ricky was still a ways behind Scaff's world record. One of the main hurdles that Ricky wanted to master before doing runs was Cineflips. Ricky had a fierce battle with Cineflips in November, spending countless hours grinding them out until finally his hands would start to find the rhythm for it. Ricky would slowly but surely grind his time down from his 23:43 down to tie with Scaff on the 31st of December with a 21:27. But he wasn't satisfied with that. He didn't come all this way just to tie world record, oh no. Ricky fired up another run and got back to work. He knew he was playing good that night and was leaving for GDQ in less than 4 days. This was his chance for glory. Later that day, Ricky achieves 21:16, untying the record with Scaff, proving that Ricky could still reclaim his place at the top even after a year of being absent.
21:16. Let's go. That's what I'm talking about. That's more like it. For the people on YouTube that were unaware, before this run, I got a 21:27, which was a 1-second PB, and I was really mad because that run is the run I'm going up against. It had the sickest early game possible. It was a 6-0. It was a 6-0. Like, you can see how basically every beginning game split I lost time on it. That's not because this run was bad or because I played bad. That's because my other PB was insane at the beginning. But I choked all the time to Battalia and Orxon 2, and this run didn't. So that's the only difference. So yeah, new PB. I'm happy with that.
At the marathon, Ricky does a great job showing off Ratchet & Clank to the thousands of viewers online and in attendance. His 22:51 was a respectable time, and Ricky was happy with his performance.
As all good games should.
Hey, we went from Crash with lots of butt slams to this one.
Yeah. All right, and time. 22. Told you.
Nice.
Let's go.
Good job, my man.
Good stuff. Good job, man.
That's awesome.
All right, hope you enjoyed.
When he got home, though, he knew the grind wasn't over. Ricky knew that there was still too much time to save for him to quit now. The third champion makes his glorious return, marking the dawn of the second Ricky dynasty. In February of 2018, it was discovered that running the game with a solid-state drive instead of a hard disk drive made the loads faster and more consistent. This led to a debate in the community if it should be allowed or not. After some tests, it was discovered that some runners had slower loads than others, even with similar hard disk drives. By switching to a solid-state drive, even a cheaper one, the variance went away and evened the playing field. The community decided that the pros outweighed the cons and allowed the use of solid-state drives. Now with the SSD in place, opening and closing the PDA was a consistent time, making PDA techs much easier to do every time. This saves a little bit of time across the run. Speaking of loads though, there's something that needs to be discussed before we move on. The Ratchet & Clank games have long and short loads. Essentially, it's possible for the game to take a slightly longer time to transition between planets. What this means is that the transition can take anywhere from 0.4 and 1.2 seconds, just because the game says so. With an average load of 0.8 seconds, most runs lose an average of 6.4 seconds. A run with all fast loads would lose 0 time, and a run with all the slowest loads would lose around 12.8 seconds. At this high level of play, this time becomes significant, so it's important to note. With an SSD and his patented determination, Ricky grinds away. His first PB with an SSD would be a 2111, and then a 2058 a week later, the first sub 21.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It didn't register. Yes, that was it. Yeah, it was it. 2059. I think it was also a gold. I think it was a gold. Oh, yes. Let's go. 2059. Oh, shit. That really vibrates.
He would get a few more PBs and land at 2042 for a while. The game was reaching the apex of optimization. Ricky now only has a few seconds at most to save on each planet. On the horizon though, Ricky can see the light at the end of the tunnel, the sub 20. In March, Ricky releases a video titled "Is Sub 20 Possible in Ratchet & Clank?" In it, he outlines the specific time saves that are available on each planet and goes over how likely getting a sub 20 run really is. While Ricky had all but 2 of the fastest segments out of the entire community, there were still a few strats that could shave off a little bit of time. A new Walloper on Novalis could save around 1.3 seconds. A new movement chain and train skip could save around 2 seconds on Kerwin. A blind Walloper chain on Battaglia could save 3 seconds. And a new discovery on Hoven could save upwards of 4 seconds. Runners were tired of getting random Hoven times and wanted to figure out if there was a consistent and fast way to do the level. Runner Does This Username went on Emulator and started looking at how this turret mission worked. He discovered that it's possible to deal 5 times as much damage to the large ship if you hit specific sweet spots. The problem is, the spots are very small and specific, so runners were not guaranteed to save much time even if they knew where to aim. But if done right, it would save a lot of time. Even with all of these time saves and accounting for good loads, Ricky's estimated time added up to a 20:03, just a few seconds shy of the goal. He knew it'd be tough, but Ricky announced that the next month, April, was going to be dedicated to Ratchet runs. The month of Rack would be filled with daily streams with a few hours of attempts. Whether or not he got the sub 20, Ricky was going to try his hardest to push himself as hard as he could, as this was likely to be his last hurrah. The month of Rack started off with a bang. On April 4th, Ricky PB'd with the 2032.
Sweaty, man. Oh, I'm... Okay, I hit it. Oh, I got it. Whew. My hands are like so fucking sweaty. I've never been this sweaty before. Whew. God damn it, I've never gotten stuck on the button either. Let's go.
The next day, another PB, 2027.
Yes! 22x. Back to back. Back to back. 2 days in a row, man. Let's go. I might have been 27, I split a little late. We'll see. I'll take a look at it later.
But some big developments made Month of Rack a real surprise. Very quickly, over the next week, 3 major time saves were discovered. First, Ricky found a faster strat for Drek's fleet. Instead of just doing infinite jumps across space to get to the end, Ricky takes a scenic route where he can build up speed on a long runway out of bounds. It may seem counterintuitive, but by chaining together long jumps along the ships, and then turning that momentum to the end goal, Ricky spends a lot less time doing IJs and saves almost 15 seconds over the previous route. After the discovery of the fleet strat, runners were convinced that there could be a new Velden 2 route. They came together in a collaborative effort and started implementing a heavily underused trick called long jump SIs. This trick allowed you to do an SI on a wall, but with a PDA glide momentum conserved. After making your way to the Drek platform with long jump SIs, you could then avoid the trigger to spawn Drek and make it to the end, 10 seconds faster than the IJ grind. Lastly, on Pokitaru, if you can kill all of the red fish before finishing the bridge extension cutscene, the guy will warp to the end even faster than the previous guy warp strategy. With all of these new developments, Ricky's sum of best went from 20 minutes down to a low 19. Ricky was so confident in these strats that only 2 weeks after his Is Sub 20 Possible video, he released a new video titled Sub 20 is Free, going over these new strategies and outlining that the 19-minute time was way more likely to happen now.
I'm getting sub 20. Like, this is absolutely happening. Like, you know, we got 15 seconds here, 10 seconds here. That's 25 seconds. My current PB is like 20:07 or whatever it is, or 20:27. And I still had time to save there. And these new strats are probably not 25. They might be more than that. So I was like, I'm determined. I can get this time.
The day after Ricky put out the video, he was back on the grind. With the new Fast Fleet, he would get a 2023. With Fast Velden, a 2016.
2017, those are 1X. It's intense as fuck, man. It's still intense as shit. It's not that bad, it's just intense.
Finally, a 2007, now only 8 seconds from what everyone wanted to see for so long. Less than 6 years ago, the fastest completed time was 1 hour and 11 minutes. Today, Ricky could comfortably complete 3 runs in that amount of time. It was time for the champion to step up. Like the days before, Ricky was grinding out runs for his month of rack. This run started off like all the others. Sticking pretty close to his best segments, Ricky stays within a few seconds of his PB. A missed clip on Blarg, a long load on Rilgar. Ricky brings it back with a godlike Battalia, and later a fantastic Hoven. Going into the last 5 levels of the game, Ricky is comfortably almost 20 seconds ahead. He closes chat. It's time to focus. With negligible time losses on Altanis and Quartu, the run is in the bag. But on Drek's fleet, Ricky hits an invisible wall during his speed buildup.
Yeah, I think I can still sub 20.
A little shaken, Ricky hasn't given up yet. Going into the final stage, Ricky is only 12 seconds ahead. If he loses more than 5 seconds here, the sub 20 isn't happening. Ricky starts up his movement chain and launches himself at the mountains. He hits the high-speed SIs, makes it to the platform. Oh no, disaster strikes. Ricky long jumps into the deceptively wide hitbox of the platform barriers. He's fumbling, he can't start a new chain. Things are looking grim, the sub 20 dream is fading away.
I don't know, that might have killed it.
But Ricky isn't giving up. In the heat of the moment, he clutches through the menu and sets himself up for the last few mid-airs. He can't see the chat, but people are feverishly posting Franker Z's. It's down to the wire. Ricky descends onto the final platform with only a few seconds to go. 3, 2, 1, time! Ratchet slams into the final button. The final time, 1958.9 seconds. The sub 20 barrier was broken.
Yes! 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 Fuck yeah! Woo! Let's go. I actually popped off for once. It's not good, but the wall's been broken.
Oh, it was phenomenal to see him doing what he was doing in the short amount of time that he did as well. Was absolutely crazy to watch. I mean, we were all there when he got sub 20 for the first time. Like someone having a goal and like finally achieving it after like loads of effort, loads of grinding, loads of practice, loads of improvement. It just felt really good. Watching Ricky do that was definitely like a huge thing for me. Pushing NG Plus to just a place where it had never been before.
Yeah, it was really fun to watch. Like I got inspired by him. Like all the grinding and what he did was great to watch. That's mostly also because I grind so much. Thanks to him.
To this day, Ricky still might view that as one of his proudest speedrunning achievements. Just knowing who he is as a person and seeing all the hard work he put into it. I mean, I know that he takes immense pride in all of that.
Finally, everything kind of came together, and I got 1959, and that's like one of the best accomplishments I've done in all of speedrunning, and that's saying a lot because I've been around for a while.
In his victory speech, Ricky describes this monumental occasion. A group of travelers are on a journey, out into the wilderness, when they come across an expansive glass wall. It impedes their progress. They can get up next to it, but never beyond it. They try everything to get through. Some try punching and kicking, others shooting it with guns. They threw themselves at the wall and were pushed back. Nothing could put a scratch on the wall. It would take a dedicated monk who would routinely strike over and over until finally the glass shattered. That is the sub 20. Ricky was well aware of the time saves that were still out there, making a mid-19 possible. With that summa best hanging around in 1915, Ricky kept going through the month of Rack. In the following days, the third champion would complete a 1943.
Oh, man, that was really good. I can barely turn my monitor on. Wow. 1943. That's actually probably my best run ever.
And a 1934, before he finally gave it a rest.
I played so bad the whole day. Missed a bunch of mid-airs. What's the time? 1934. That was a 120 Belden. Let's go, boys. Let's go. 1934. Oh. Holy shit. Well, that run was so nuts. That run was so good.
Ricky would try to beat the 1934 for about another week before ending the month of Rack early. He was very satisfied with how far he was able to push himself, and knew if it was really so hard to beat that 1934, it was the right choice to let it rest. Finally, after running the game for over 3 years, Ricky officially retired, again. The only champion to reign supreme twice, Ricky left a legacy that will stand for all time.
People in the Ratchet community really, really love Ricky. They really do. And so I think pretty much every single person in the community was cheering him on, and so to see the fan favorite of the Ratchet Discord hit this legendary time, you know, people were saying, you know, one of the best runs the community has ever seen. And people still agree upon that to this day, like the amount of hard work he had to put in to get sub 20. I mean, obviously Franz has since surpassed him at Rack 1, but you know, he really was a maverick for the game. I mean, at multiple points in its lifespan, from the very, very beginning when he was involved in the community in 2012, 2013, up until he got his 2343, and then beyond that. Of all the people to ever carry the torch throughout Ratchet 1's history, I mean, you can't. There's no other person who could even come close. Everybody has had their periods, but I think Rack 1 really starts and obviously not ends, but certainly climaxes with Ricky.
Our story isn't over though. No one run stands forever. A young man from Italy had been slowly climbing the leaderboard since 2017. Meet Franz. When Franz started running Ratchet & Clank, he met another Italian speedrunner in the community. They challenged each other and competed with their times. Soon, Franz would pass his friend, who eventually stopped running the game. Without another clear competitor, Franz looked to the leaderboard. He saw the name above his and thought, I can beat that. And so he did. And then he saw the next name. I can beat that. And so, over the next year, Franz would challenge himself to snag the next position on the board. While he never had aspirations for world record, in April of 2018, when Ricky retired, Franz found himself approaching the summit, with only Ricky standing in the way. Franz would need to become a champion of Ratchet & Clank in order to take on the king, but he was ready.
And we started like racing Rack 1. At that point I never ran the game. But so my first goal was bopping this other Italian guy. At the time I think he had 22, so pretty decent time. And after I did beat him, he stopped playing. My next goal was just beating the guy next on the leaderboard. And every time I just bopped someone, I wanted to bop the next one. Like, that was what kept me going, just wanting to beat the next guy on the leaderboard. And when I reached like second place, I never thought of getting world record, but like I just realized that I could, that I just needed to grind, and maybe one day I could get it.
Franz would grind on and off over the months, slowly but surely creeping up to Ricky's 1934. In May, Franz achieved a 2039 and a 2023. In August, Franz would get a sub-20 run of his own with a 1951 on August 9th. Franz turned his aim towards other categories, like all gold bolts and any percent, but he was still playing Ratchet & Clank. Finally, on November 3rd, Franz made it to the top. Standing on the shoulders of the giants that came before him, Franz pulled out a 1928. Using the same strats as Ricky, Franz stays neck and neck with Ricky's run, maintaining a 1-second lead for most of the run. But on Gemlick and Fleet, Franz takes the lead and brings it home. With no other names above him on the leaderboard, Franz takes a break from Ratchet & Clank.
Yeah, I'm really proud of Franz, honestly. Like, I have no other way to describe his progression, because Franz started out as a pretty average runner, and he was just kind of slowly improving his way. Like, I didn't really think much of him at first. I think when he got his first 21, this is the first time when anybody was like a minute and a half off of me, and I was like, wow, this is pretty big. And he just kind of kept improving. And I think the moment, because if you compare our attempts, Franz at the time of getting 1928 was his attempt counter was somewhere in the 1500s, or 15,000 runs, which means that he spent a numerous more amount of time on the game than I ever did, attempting to improve, and he was persistent and he just kept going. I was just really, really happy for him. I honestly have just never been happier to have one of my greatest runs go down like that.
As 2018 came to a close, top runners and strat finders Franz, Ricky, Isaki, and Does This Username all got together and worked out a community segmented run. Each runner tackled different parts of the run and showed off all the best possible strats on each level, while assuming all the fastest loads between planets. Some of the levels look about the same as they do in Ricky and Franz's PBs, but other levels utilize risky IL strats that were too dangerous to pull off in a record pace run. Some notable planets include Rilgar and Umbris with their risky void out death abuses to warp back to the ship faster, and Ultanis with a really hard Walloper chain to skip riding the platform back to the ship. When the video was released in January of 2019, the community was astounded by the 1812 that they had obtained. Inspired by this video, and seeing that there was still work to be done, Franz vowed to come back and continue pushing the run. Finally, around the start of June 2019, Franz gets down to business. The 5th champion of Ratchet 1 wouldn't need long to de-rest, and was back in the saddle in no time. With the help of a new strat on Quartu, Franz beats his previous record with a 1918, a very solid time. Franz cleaned up his Battalia and his endgame, and saved 10 seconds over his previous best run. With an endurance and dedication that rivals even Ricky, Franz pushed his amazing time even further. This is where the record stands today. Franz had put a lot of work into his play, but he doesn't always have time to grind out attempts. He says he has plans to continue pushing the game, with a goal to break into an 18-minute time. This will require some crazy new strategies, but Franz is very capable of accomplishing his goal. Besides these top runners, the community strategists are always looking for new and interesting route changes. There's an idea that's been floating around for years known as Pokeskip. If Clank could possibly chase down the infobot on Orxon without the help of Ratchet, runners could skip going to Poketaro and Gaspar for the O2 mask and the pilot helmet. The problem is, Clank can reach all of the bot locations except for one. It's likely that it will lose time, but if the community can find the last piece of the puzzle, a new route could be viable. Only time will tell if this idea becomes reality. Even if it's not viable or faster, it would at least be a huge achievement.
Even if it gets found, it's obviously gonna be slower. But just the thought of skipping Gaspar and the entirety of Poki is pretty nice thing.
The history of Ratchet 1 speedrunning spans more than 10 years. During that time, 5 runners have gone above and beyond, pushing the game to the edge every time. Maybe a new champion will rise someday to join the pantheon, but for now, the community recognizes and appreciates the efforts of the 5 monks who dared to venture out into the wilderness and shatter the walls that held them back. Hey, thanks for watching our video. If you want to join the community, check out our Discord. Also, consider supporting us on Patreon. It really helps. Thanks.